My name is Irina, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm also a little nervous because it's always hard to follow someone like Paul, who's a really fantastic storyteller. But I hope I am going to win you over at least a little bit because my talk is going to be super practical. As Rob said, I'm going to talk about building buzz and backlinks and a little bit of context as why I'm speaking about this. I come from a company called HubSpot. Traditionally, the company's been around for 10, 12 years right now, and traditionally it's been a marketing automation software. And a lot of people know the name HubSpot if they're working in marketing. But in the past couple of years, the company has been launching new products to different markets who aren't typically so into the marketing space and the brands there. So HubSpot has been launching a free CRM, live chat software, meeting scheduler, phone builder, et cetera. We've got I think probably over 10 different features. Some of them are freemium. And it hasn't been really easy to launch these new features in markets where the name HubSpot isn't traditionally very well known. So this is where kind of me and a lot of people kind of like myself come in. And our job is to build a buzz. I also build backlinks to all of these products. And the overall goal is to increase the number of users and the signups and generally the sales for these products. So this is what I do, and this is what I want to talk about to you today. But before getting into all the nitty-gritty of building backlinks and buzz, I have another confession. I'm a pretty avid reader. And from what I've been talking to different people today and yesterday, I think I'm in the right crowd. A lot of people here are book lovers, bookworms, such as myself. I've got a few book recommendations already. And I actually have an exercise that I want to propose for you to do at home, kind of a bit of an experiment. I would like you to think about the way you purchased your last book and why you purchased it. And I want to talk to you about this because I've done this experiment relatively recently when I realized I went to kind of an interesting process when I bought this book called A Gentleman in Moscow. Now, as I said, I've been quite an avid reader all my life, and I have a pretty typical process of buying books. I usually go to my friends or my family, and I say, "Oh, what are you reading?" Well, that unless I have lots of books that I want to read. But if I don't want to go to that list and I'm looking for something new, I usually ask for recommendations. But in this particular case, though I normally take those recommendations and read those books. In this case, none of the things that they recommended at that time seemed particularly interesting for me. So I did what I would do in often other situations like this, and that is I would go to some places that I think that are trusted resources for me, like the New York Times bestseller, like the recommended sections of Goodreads. And the reason I do all of these things is because there are just too many books out there, and I have just one life, and I want to spend my time reading something and start something that is really interesting. So I need someone to do that job for me and curate lists and show me these are the best 10 books. Pick something, because I want to pick the best one for me. I didn't find anything necessarily interesting, or nothing convinced me in those lists. So I end up on one of those top 10 lists. I don't know if you guys follow Bill Gates' summer readings, but I'm particularly a fan, even though I rarely read things about the gas industry or things that he recommends. I just like to see what he recommends. And this time, I noticed he recommended a novel, which, if you're familiar with the types of books that Bill Gates recommends, you know that he's not really a fiction guy. He doesn't really recommend novels. But the way he kind of described this A Gentleman in Moscow, I thought it was really interesting. And I was kind of half sold just because it's not a typical Bill Gates recommendation. So what I did afterwards, I want to look for reviews of this book. I wanted to see what other people are saying about this. I always look at Goodreads, and I read a few comments, and I read a few descriptions. I don't really mind spoilers. I'm more interested in just finding a book that I know I'm going to like. So pretty good reviews, good recommendation. I end up buying the book. And then after a while, I kind of think about this process that I went through, and I'm like, okay, this is actually quite similar, I think, to the way people buy HubSpot products. Like they often they know about it from recommendations from their friends. They found out about it from like trusted sources. They go into curated lists. And obviously they look at reviews and ratings, sorry. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that this is actually a phenomenon that happens in a lot of industries. Because everywhere we go to right now, there's a plethora of solutions and products that people can choose from that it's absolutely overwhelming. And we want to get the best of the best. So we need recommendations. That's why you find things like lists like this in almost any industry. This is a list of 10 best camping tents, 10 best dog toys, best free dating side apps for singles on a budget. So this is very specific for people who really are like facing some challenges, but there's a list. And my favorite, this is a list of places where you can go to find lists. That is in case the lists that you found weren't specific enough. You weren't particularly satisfied. You can have more lists. But joke aside, this is actually a phenomenon that you can like trace all the way up to the way Google shows search results. I don't know if you can tell what's the tiny writing on top there, but this says that this screenshot is a SERP overview, a search engine results page overview for the keyword best meeting scheduler. Like 3, maybe like more years ago, when you would type these kind of things into Google, Google would return to you a list of tools. Like the search results page would be filled with Calendly, Doodle, and other actual tools that Google, through its like own algorithm, would decide to be like the best solutions to you. But right now, users don't need Google and don't want Google to recommend them solutions. Users want Google to recommend them the best places where they can see what are the top recommended solutions in that particular niche. That's why, and I'm going to highlight this to you, for the keyword best meeting scheduler, with one exception, all of the results are listicles, are a list of best meeting schedulers that you can pick from. And I picked this particular example because HubSpot happens to have a solution in this space, and if you would be looking at the search result page from a ranking perspective, you would think that we have a pretty sucky SEO team. But in reality, we're actually present in 4 out of these 10 results. So our visibility as a product, even though the actual product page isn't ranking for the keyword best meeting scheduler, is present and is visible where people are actually actively searching for solutions in this space. They can compare it, they can see it's free, it's from a renowned brand, etc. We have chances of acquiring new customers. And the more interesting thing about this, looking at search results from this perspective, is that we started looking at our visibility for different products at stages of the buying funnel. And the way you would think about it, I know you've seen quite a few funnels in the past couple of days, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel in any way, but I want you to think about the way people buy products or discover products in your particular niche. I think about this at the top of the funnel, in this case, as product-led content. Right? People would start by looking for things in let's say, the email marketing space as how to start an email marketing campaign. That is the type of content that is quite top of the funnel, but it's also very product-related. Because you cannot think about how to start an email marketing campaign these days without actually thinking about the technology behind it. So though it's very top of the funnel and educational type of content, is still a content that is very much related to a particular product or a set of products. So for this top of the funnel space, I would like you to think about what other types of keywords or other types of queries would people use to discover ways to use products such as yourself. see what are the top 10 search results for those keywords, and then see what's your visibility in those articles, in those examples. Is your website ranking there? Are there any websites that you could partner with? And calculate your visibility. And then you'll see how visible you are at the product-led content level. Same for the middle of the funnel. This is a space where I think it's even more important as a product to be present, where people are looking for, they already know that they want an email marketing tool or a best meeting scheduler tool or their best tent or the best dog toy for their pet. And you want your dog toy to be there. And if it's not, then it's probably, and if your site isn't ranking, then probably your product visibility is quite low at a place where you could very well be acquiring new customers. And lastly, the bottom of the funnel in this case is when people have already decided between, let's say, HubSpot and MailChimp, and they look for comparisons. Or they look for very specific comparisons, actually. HubSpot versus MailChimp, like an entire article or a page or review, etc. So as a conclusion for this theoretical part, I think it's very important from an SEO and backlinks perspective to start looking at mentions in search results rather than rankings by themselves, because mentions are going to be more valuable and are going to help you increase your visibility even in places where it's way too competitive from an SEO perspective to rank. And lastly, yes, it's important to be visible where it matters. I think I skipped a few slides by mistake. My finger got too excited. But that said, that theoretical part being over, I want to start looking at exactly some of the tactics in which you can conquer these spaces, friend recommendations, trusted sources, curated lists, and reviews and ratings, so that you are able to drive more users to your product. And I'm going to start by, first of all, kind of redefining these sources in names that are more familiar to marketers. Well, first of all, the friends' recommendations could actually be your customers' case studies or your partners' reviews. Those trusted sources that I've been checking, those are the influencers in your space. They can be companies, they can be niche publications, or they can be actually individuals. Then there are the best of lists, the listicles that appear in the top 10 search results for best of, whatever your niche is, and then directories. And I want to start by discussing some ways in which you can leverage the relationships with your customers and partners so that they can get more buzz and backlinks. Obviously, this is a great place to start because it's just easier to build something from within your network, because those people already know your brand, they already know what you're doing, and potentially they actually love your product and are happy to recommend it. Now, there are many ways in which you can leverage this. Of course, creating really appealing case studies could be a solution. But what I would think would also be really easy from an SEO perspective and a link building perspective is to make sure that you leverage all of the brand mentions and you try to claim a link back to your website every time a customer or a partner or supplier mentions your brand. The reason why I like to recommend this is because I think it's one of the easiest ways to earn backlinks. It's very efficient, and from my experience and talking to other SEO specialists, this is the kind of tactic that has a 50% success rate. For those of you who have ever done a link building campaign, you probably know that the success rate of 50% is pretty close to heaven, because most link building campaigns' success rate varies between 2 to 4%. So you have to email 100 companies. You're all developers, so I don't need to do the math for you, but you can understand how valuable this can be for your particular brand. The way you do it is basically just kind of keep an eye on whoever mentions your brand. I think the place to start could be Google Alerts, and you start putting together a list of mentions. Of course, if you're more into like creating content for SEO purposes, and if the SEO is something that's quite interesting for you, I do recommend like you use a professional SEO tool like Ahrefs, SEMrush, Mention, or BuzzSumo, but you can very well live at this point with Google Alerts as well. One little trick that I like to do is like once I put together the list of partners that do mention my brand, is I want to check which one of those already links back to my website. So I just have like this like super simple Google Sheet script where I can like just check for like, I don't know, 10, 50 articles if that website already, that article actually, that website already links back to my website. If they don't, that is the opportunity. I can already go and reach out to those. Again, the reason why I always recommend this solution is because over time, of all the different tactics that I've used for HubSpot, and you can see what kind of like things I usually try to build backlinks to HubSpot. The unlinked brand mention is actually the tactic that never fails. Like every month, I get actually to build links to our products through this tactic. That is the red line, a red bar that is quite constant over a period of time. Getting to the second influencer source, the influencers and the publications. This is actually one of my favorite tactics because it involves actually like building some relationships and becoming a valuable contributor. And I remember before joining HubSpot, I used to work for a startup back in my home country in Romania. We built an SEO tool for agencies called SEO Monitor. And we didn't really have any kind of like resources that we could leverage other than our own expertise. So the way we started at that time to create a name for ourselves and start building the buzz around our brand was to share some of that expertise. So slowly, maybe too slow for that time, we started becoming valuable contributors. Now, I know that a lot of the people in this room have a ton of expertise to share. And one of the brands that really come to mind right now is Feedback Panda. I don't know if you guys were as mesmerized as me yesterday, but like I felt like their story about like how they managed to like find such a niche audience, but then again, like such an audience that needed a tool so badly was actually fantastic. I think for them, I don't know the business that well, but I thought like that story with the audience was such a gold mine for one, becoming a contributor in that particular audience, but also potentially for talking about their product and about the way they've discovered the audience to other startups, like literally what they did on the stage, but on other publications. And that's, you cannot talk about a particular brand or the story of a brand without actually mentioning the product. So you build your brand, you create buzz, and you also build backlinks to your product. So the recommended solution in this case for me oftentimes is pitching guest posts. And I have another example here, and this is a bit closer to my home. And you can see one of our vice presidents, Kieran Flanagan, posted an article on a publication for product managers about how HubSpot kind of changed from marketing qualified leads to product qualified leads. This is quite an interesting information if you're a product marketer. But at the same time, so it delivered value to that audience. The publication was happy to publish the article. And at the same time, talking about product qualified leads meant talking about our products, meant backlinks, meant buzz, meant a lot of benefits generally for our brand. Now, there's another tactic that you could use if you already have quite a lot of content on your website. If you have a blog that you've been using for quite a while, and let's say you have some articles that are quite evergreen, but they don't really bring any more traffic to your website, so they're quite like zero traffic at the moment. Now that's an opportunity I think you should leverage in a different way. Instead of like keeping everything on your website and like using a lot of Google crawl budget for not a lot of visits actually, you could take some of those articles, upcycle them, like refresh them a little bit and use them as guest posts or content syndication. This is something that we've done recently at HubSpot. In all honesty, like we do have a blog that's been there for more than 10 years, and the company generally is very focused on content. So we've pruned about 3,000 articles, and about 500 of them ended up being pitched as guest posts because they were still quite evergreen, and it was quite easy to update them and create them as refresh them as a new piece. So this could be also a tactic that you might be interested in doing. Because of all the tactics that I've been using for the past year in getting product mentions and product backlinks, a fly. This content syndication was actually the one that brought the biggest chunk of backlinks. I think about like 600 so far this year alone. So quite a lot of bang for the buck. Hope that's the right expression. Of course, there are other, in this space of like becoming a valuable contributor, there's a lot you can play around with. I don't know how many of you have heard of Haro, Help a Reporter Out. Yeah, quite a few. Well, it's an interesting tool. It offers the possibility for journalists to connect with experts. So whenever a journalist or a blogger wants to like write an article and like needs expert opinions, puts out a query on Haro, and you as an expert get a list of such queries in the morning and in the afternoon, and you've got about, I don't know, between 24 and 48 hours to like send a quick quote, and if it's going to get picked up, 90% chances there are that the article and the quote is going to include a link as well. Now, there is one downside to Haro. It usually serves like an English-speaking market, so if you're just focused on, I don't know, the Croatian market or the German market, Haro might not be for you. But if you're targeting an English-speaking market, then this is definitely the way to go. I also like it because if you like put the time and effort into like writing a short piece of content for that journalist, about 2 to 3 times out of 10, you're going to get published. And the other 7 or 8 times that you're not, you've already kind of created a short piece of content that you can use on your blog. You can pitch as a quote to other articles and to other partners, or you can just use on your social media, on your blog. But before starting, I would suggest just spend about a week. This is what I did with Haro to see whether or not it was a good investment. I waited for about a month, and every day I would put together a list of all the queries that were relevant for my company. And I would see like what would be the topics about. So I would like be able to be prepared. What should I be writing about in case I do want to pursue this? And like how many queries would I be getting per day? Like how much time and effort should I put into? What should I expect? What are the domain authority of the websites that usually ask for such questions? So before you like jump in and put a lot of effort, I would suggest to assess whether or not this is a market opportunity for you. And as I said, I've done this little experiment, and at least in the marketing space, most of the websites that pitch quotes via Haro have a domain authority between 40 and 60, which is absolutely fantastic, especially if you're just starting out. An average of 2, sometimes 3 out of 10 answers get picked up. And the last recommended solution that I have for becoming a contributor is actually podcasts. I've been speaking about this a little bit earlier, and someone asked like what would be like the best way to pitch a podcast. I think from my experience with HubSpot and with the startup that I used to work with, the story had a lot of value. When pitching to be part of a podcast episode, to be interviewed, to create a series with someone. And what I mean by that is there is no way in which you can growth hack your way into podcasting. You cannot send a mass email. You cannot create a template to use for 10, 20, 30 podcasts. These people are quite bombarded with emails like that and are quite, probably Rob can speak about this a lot better. They're pretty sick of seeing people pitching themselves or writing short, long, whatever, things that are completely irrelevant. If you do have a story to tell, I would say put the time and effort into actually pitching it, because if that's going to be something that's going to resonate with the podcast host, you have a high chances to get on the podcast. Then again, one of my getting to the third section of influencer sources, and these are best of listicles. As I was saying earlier, I refer to these not generally all of the lists that were ever written about a particular topic in the world, but mostly the ones that kind of get traffic constantly. So the ones that rank in, let's say, top 20 of Google search results. And the way you would be approaching this is you can, depending on how authoritative is your website, you can create those lists on your own website and rank with them. Or if your website is quite new, it's probably better to create some kind of premium partnerships. And to give you an example, I was actually talking, I think yesterday, with someone from the audience that has a business in a tool for fitness trainers. And the tool is pretty cool. As I was listening to his story and the way the tool works, I remembered that for a while I did some sort of training with an online trainer, and we would exchange information on WhatsApp. And she was like, "Oh, send me these pictures," or she'll send me a recipe. It was quite a bit of a mess. And his tool was actually designed to kind of create some sort of great communication between a trainer and a client. And I thought, afterwards, as I was thinking a little bit about the product, I started looking at what kind of search results appear for best trainer apps or best software for trainers. And the interesting thing was that there were already quite a few results. The top results were from 2019, but then starting from position 3 or 4, there were a lot of results from 2014, 2015. So there's already a niche there where you can see that there isn't a lot of way creators that are so eager to always be on top of the search result, in the marketing space. So there is some way you can leverage a little bit of that by creating some new content that is more relevant on your own website. Or you can always partner with the websites that already rank there if they're not your direct competitors. You can create some sort of affiliate program, or just generally try to find out how you could better help that particular company reach their own goals, so that you can get on that list. Before I get started, I just remembered right now when I was, I told you I used to work for a Romanian startup that was an SEO tool, and as we were starting, every little product mention or every little place where we will get exposed would be a small win for us. But it was always us for a while kind of trying to build that buzz. And then one day, we got this notification on Google Alerts that Backlinks, that Brian Dean, had published another update of his best SEO tools, and it was a top 100, and SEO Monitor was on that list. And it was the best day ever, because someone with such a big name had discovered our tool and put us, even though we're at the bottom of the list, or in the last, one of the last tools, we're still on the top 100. If I could go back to whenever this was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and change something, I would definitely do my best to get in touch with Brian Dean and do whatever possible to bump us to the top of the list or among the top solutions, because that's where you're going to get a lot of visibility. And if Brian Dean would have said no, I would have tried to do the same with all the other top SEO tools. So right now, If you want to do that, and if you don't want to be like me, and like after a few years say, oh, I should have done this, because now all of my competitors have done it, build a list of all of the keywords that you think people would like use to search for different product alternatives, such as your product. Then check on how many of those lists your product is already mentioned, and try to see whether or not you can create some sort of partnership with those lists and get your brand mentioned. As I said earlier, I think it's quite valuable to try to understand what's your visibility if you're at a kind of like a growth stage, how often you are present in these listicles in top 10, top 20, and top 50 for a particular keyword or a particular topic of keywords. And then try to understand how visible you are at different levels of the buyer's journey. If you want to simplify a little bit this process, one of my colleagues from HubSpot has actually built a tool. His name is Alex Briquette, and you can actually access this tool for free. Please tell him I recommended him. This tool is just going to like search for you, and like it's going to give you the top 10, top 20, or top 50 search results for whatever keyword you need, and it's going to show you on how many of those results your product has already mentioned. You can be very specific, and you can say, oh, check whether or not company.com is mentioned, or check whether or not company.com/product is mentioned. And lastly, directories. I know that as an SEO, like mentioning the word directories is not something that people often do. Directories have had a really, really bad name, a bad reputation in the SEO industry, and that's because they were obviously like used for the worst, and they were just like a lot of directories built simply for SEO purposes. But there are plenty of directories out there where your brand should be mentioned, where you should like start building reviews, because people at the last stage of their buyer journey are always going to compare products and are always going to be looking at how many people reviewed or how many people have appreciated a product. Just think about the way we pick restaurants these days. Google My Business is just an example of such a directory, and I'm not sure exactly like what kind of directories are in every niche, but I put together a list of potentially directories that are like, these lists are written by SEO specialists, so be sure that everything you're going to find in these lists are going to be good for your business from an SEO perspective. So this is my talk. Talked about like how to get friends' recommendations, or how to get into trusted sources, curated lists, and reviews. And if we were to kind of like summarize this whole experience into like 3 lessons or 3 bullets, I'd say probably strive to be a top recommended solution, build partnerships to deliver your visibility, and always look for mentions and like not necessarily rankings, because the most important thing is to be visible where it matters. Thank you very much. That was all.